Hey, fellow patriots, I'm Bree.
And I'm Blaze. Some call me Pa. It has been said that we have 4 boxes to keep ourselves free. These are the soap box, the ballot box, the jury box, and the ammo box.
And we are the 4th box. We are here to arm you with enough information, resources, and skills to take back your freedom, increase your self-sufficiency, and inspire you to join in the fight against tyranny.
Thomas Jefferson said, "Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty." Thank you for joining us and for joining in this fight.
Welcome back to the 4th box. Okay, everybody, welcome back to another week at the 4th Box podcast. This is a very special recording for us. It's one of our favorite days of the year, in fact. And of course, it won't be once you hear this podcast, but we are recording on March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, which we are proud to say we are enough Irish to celebrate appropriately, and we do every year. So welcome back, Pops. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Happy St. Patrick's Day to you. I'm ready to toast with my creamy Irish stout. Before we do that, as you mentioned, we here have made a fuss over St. Patrick's Day for a long time, including the traditional family activity of burning the Christmas tree, which took place just a couple hours ago, and we usually have a stout or a little snort of something while that's going on. So as part of a month-long celebration for us, as you mentioned, with a little bit of Irish in it, but certainly enough that we can carry on in full tradition. So we're halfway through, but I think most of the activities take place in the first half of the month, St. Paddy's parties and so on. So we're certainly happy to come to you a couple of days after St. Patrick's Day, remembering that this was actually recorded on St. Patrick's Day. So welcome back, Patriots. You are once again joining us on the 4th Box podcast, coming to you from the virtual Buckman Tavern, the place that Patriots gather. And tonight I have a long list of toast to make. And first and foremost is going to be our friends and oftentimes contributors to the show, Jared and Mike from up in South Dakota. We're happy to report that the Bosley bill has passed and been signed in with overwhelming support, which is holding back the illegal trampling of people's grounds through the misuse of eminent domain, government-sanctioned criminality going on up in South Dakota. So we're very, very happy. We're proud of those guys up there. They know they continue to have a battle, as now they're going to try to go over the head of the state. But those guys have made a great, great example for all of us in this country how to stand up. And with that in mind, as part of my toast, and before that, let's have a little snort to Jared and Mike.
Yeah, hear.
The next one I'd like to mention, a lot of activities along this line. I'd like to think that Jared and those guys up there maybe set the example, or at least they were the first that we knew that really made a unified effort in their community and their state to push back against this criminality. So secondarily, I want to call out Sheriff Kevin McMahill from Las Vegas, the Clark County, I believe, is the county Las Vegas is in Nevada, who has refused the judge's orders to release a criminal who has a 35 count spreadsheet, including all kind of heinous activity, and the judge ordered him to be released with an ankle bracelet, and the sheriff is refusing to do that, looking out for the welfare of his community and standing in the face of weaponized government, just like Jared and the fellas did up in South Dakota. I'm so proud of this sheriff. Sheriff Mack and Sam were talking about it this morning. I had read a quick story on it. Of course, this thing is going to be appealed all the way up to the state Supreme Court out in Nevada, and we are standing solidly behind Sheriff Kevin McMahill, who stood in the face of weaponized government. So 3 cheers to Kevin. I wrote him a note through the sheriff's website out there. Very proud of those guys.
Yeah, right on. Cheers. That's another great example of, the type of peaceful force that we can do and we can use to take a stand against this stuff.
Yep, that is correct. This is the kind of thing that we really subscribe to and promote here at the Fourth Box. Next up, I have the citizens up in the state of Connecticut a week ago. They took a stand igniting a midnight revolt that sent shockwaves through the state government. So, what was going on up there with the government level, state level, and local level crackdown on firearms, on the vaccine enforcement, on homeschooling, and the citizens had enough, and they went in and raised hell at a public meeting and stood in the face once again of government forcing itself on the people. It is absolutely supposed to work the other way around. And this is the kind of thing that we stand in full support of. Organize, stand up, and say, no, we will not tolerate this type of activity. Again, weaponized government is what I like to call it. And here again is another example. This just happened a week ago. And lastly, on my list tonight, similar activities, there was, I believe it's 16 electors that have been charged numerous felonies out in the state of Michigan by the Attorney General, stemming all the way back to the election. And because these people, most of which are senior citizens, by the way, they voted against what they knew was going on as part of the many investigations are continuing to uncover improprieties through the election system. Anyway, these 16 people have charges filed against them and have had the last 5 years being harassed by that state level government out there, Attorney General. I think her name is, I have it written down here someplace. Anyway, it didn't matter. The Attorney General out there and Gretchen Whitmer administration have been basically harassing these people, charging them with felonies. Now they have turned around and filed a lawsuit, which appears to be getting some traction, and we stand in solid support of those folks. Again, when the government is weaponized against the people, it's up to us to organize and push back. This is, without a question, the exact opposite of the way this system is supposed to work. They work for us, but we need to stand up and remind them of that. So starting with Jared and the Bosley bill up in South Dakota and those others listed, these are great examples which we fully support. If anybody needs help organizing, we here at the Fourth Box, we are here to arm you with information, with support, with other people you can get a hold of. If you have a situation like this that you want to stand opposed to, please allow us to help you. That is what we are here for. We are here trying to arm the citizenry to stand up against weaponized government. So there's 4 great examples tonight. I'm very, very happy to bring those to our listeners, and especially happy for Jared and those guys up in South Dakota. I know the battle will continue on all of these fronts, but at least it's somebody taking a stand.
Yeah, all great stories. Thank you for sharing. It's so important that we talk about these things because so often we think that we're the minority, and I know we say it again and again. We're really not. We're just forced to believe that. They are trying to squash any hope that we have by not making these stories known. It's not a big surprise, and it shouldn't be to any of us, that these are not stories that we're hearing about in major headlines. They don't want us to think that we, the people, actually have the ability to take a stand and to do something to counteract all of the insane and tyrannical things that they are doing. So, yeah, we'll certainly do our best to try to continue to share stories like this so that it serves as a reminder that people are stepping up and taking a stance against this stuff. Even if it's just 1, 2 here, there, small doses across the country, it's just like we've said to Jared and Mike. It takes an irate but tireless minority.
That's correct.
That's what it takes. So these stories are really important.
And I hope they gather steam. And just remember, when you feel oppressed, Get your neighbors, get other like-minded people. 3, 4, 5 people start showing up at the sheriff's office or at the county commissioner's office or at your local representative's office. It makes a big difference. Go with other people, and pretty soon you start to build momentum, just like the stories that Jared and Mike shared up there. As that thing built momentum and they went around the state and gathered signatures, they started to build this coalition that was willing to support each other. And that is what they try to squash down. But that is where our power is. We have to gather, we have to coalesce around a message. And when somebody feels any story similar to this that you are ready to push back on, gather with your neighbors, gather with your friends, get like-minded people, and go down and start pounding on desk and demand a change. And this is the peaceful way that we subscribe to here at the Fourth Box, arming ourselves with ammunition to push back against tyrannical government.
Yeah, perfect.
So then the quote tonight: a leader who removes state restrictions on freedom is acting to remove a wrong and thereby establish restitution. It is not an act of tyranny or theft or enslavement. Removing a wrong, such as abolishing the income tax or the Federal Reserve, does not impose restrictions on anybody. It frees people from theft. And that is from George F. Smith. I thought that was an absolute superb analogy. When somebody in government or people coalesce and have government change away from some of these things, it is not placing restrictions. It is removing wrongs that are being done to us. And this goes along with some of those stories we just talked about.
Yeah. Great quote. I know you wanted to share a historical maybe toast if we want to do a fifth toast. I don't know if you want to share that now or share it later on, but I know we had mentioned sharing some stories of American history through this.
I think we can do it now.
Let's do it now.
Yeah, so we're going to toast to this story. I'm getting a little dry in the throat, so I'm going to have a snort now.
Smart.
Mm-hmm. All right, this story, another great story, a moment in history. We're going to call this series that we're going to bring to you. We're going to try and bring an historical event that kind of coincides with where we are throughout the year, relating back to 250 years ago as we celebrate our 250th year of the Declaration of Independence and the official founding of this country. So 250 years ago, early in March, is a story that I found, and it was called the fortification of Dorchester Heights, which is some areas surrounding Boston, which I suppose you're not too far from there sometimes when you're up in that area, Bree. But this story is so fantastic. So basically what happened up there after the battles of Lexington and Concord, the British kind of moved back into the Boston area and basically took over the city of Boston, and that was their stronghold. And on the outskirts were the colonialists or the rebels or whatever you wanted to call them, the folks that were really after Lexington and Concord seeking to achieve their independence and get out from under the crown. So General Washington was up there, and General Howe with the British was in Boston, and Washington was out in the surrounding areas, and it was kind of a stalemate. It was a siege going on where the Brits were kind of contained to Boston, but they had really strong fortifications, and Washington really didn't have the troops. They were undertrained, they were ill-equipped, they didn't have a lot of things to push them out of the city. So early in March, almost a year later after Lexington and Concord, there was a colonel who moved 50-some pieces of artillery from Fort Ticonderoga out in New York. 300 miles. They brought them across frozen rivers, and they moved this equipment up to Washington's position. And I think it was on the night of 4th or 5th of March, they decided that they were going to get the cannons and so forth up on Dorchester Heights, where they would have a commanding view over the city of Boston and of Boston Harbor. So all in one night, and this is where some of the founders will invoke the name of the Lord as being their guiding light, and the hand of divine providence provided these very special blessings that allowed them to be successful. So there was a thick fog over the city. Above the fog was a bright moon. So the moon was shining on the hill, which enabled the American patriots to set up fortifications, they had portable fort walls, and they had these things that were made out of tree limbs and sticks, and they built these walls, and they set these cannons in position up on this hill under cover of the fog, but they were working and digging in battlements under the light of the moon. So there was a layer of fog that provided a certain level of dampening the sound. And the Brits did not even know this was going on. And Washington moved all these cannons and so forth up onto this hill. And when the sun come up in the morning, the Brits, opened up their eyes, and it looked like a fort was built overnight. And it was done because the fog provided cover, the moon provided light. They got everything in position. And then Washington was going to attack the city of Boston to try to push out General Howe of the British Army and all of his men that were there. He was going to try and push them out of Boston. But a storm blew up because the ships were going to move and try and fire at the cannons on the hill. But the storm blew in, and Washington did not attack, and the boats could not make it to fire upon the cannons that the Patriots had moved into place. So both sides decided against what they had originally planned, which they said would ended up being very fortuitous for Washington, because they said the Brits had really great fortifications, and Washington would have taken a real loss right there. Instead, Howe retreats and leaves Boston.
Wow.
So they said there was 4 significant events: the fog, the moon, Washington not attacking, and a storm out at sea that pushed the boats back away. They said all, in their opinion, in many of their opinion, George Washington included, suggested that it was the hand of divine providence that provided this significant victory on the road to, through the battle for independence. So that was a story I had not heard of. It's a really great story. There's a lot more details that go into it. You can look up the fortification of Dorchester Heights, and that is the basic backdrop of that story. Just one of those things that happened. And you can imagine these Patriots were out there very ill-equipped. Half of them didn't have shoes. They didn't have much gunpowder, but they moved this stuff in, and they ended up freeing Boston from the Brits that had been occupying that city for most of a year at that time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wow. It's incredible. There's a lot of cool stories from that time in our history, and I wish people would familiarize themselves with those, because it's going to take that level of courage and fearlessness and, truly the hand of God to turn this around and right this ship. So, thank you for sharing, and cheers to all of those folks and everything that happened. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So if you happen to find any other ones, as we're going through the year, I'll look through my books and I'll look, because some of these stories are just so interesting, and they are extremely powerful when you think about what these folks were up against and what their level of commitment was to get out from under the tyranny that brought them over here in the first place. And they were not going to allow themselves to be placed back in that bondage. And the courage and the fortitude and the wisdom and the hand of divine providence that led, Washington and others to accomplish this, it's just overwhelming. And it's a great bit of history. We're going to try and reflect on it throughout the year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you for sharing. Moving into the bulk of the episode tonight, I think we're going to just kind of try and hit on some of the stories that are going around. I'm just going to go ahead and start. I'm sure you've seen, but for our audience, for those of you who haven't, the Director of National Counterterrorism, Joe Kent, resigned, stating, I'm going to use his direct quote here, I cannot in good conscience support the ongoing war in Iran. Iran has posed no imminent threat to our nation, and it is clear that we started this war under pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. So, pretty important what happened there. And I am quite certain that this guy is going to catch a ton of flack. But this is the stance that our government officials should be taking. At a certain point, we have to call it what it is, and we have to be honest with ourselves that pretending this is our fight in any capacity is a lie, and it's a scam. And not only is it stealing more wealth from the American people, but stealing lives as well. And it's not something any of us signed on for. It's not anything any of us wished for. And in fact, it's the exact opposite of what most of us actually voted for. So that's a really big story, and I hope that people are paying attention to the weight that carries, because it's very important to have someone at this level step away and be willing to speak out on something as severe as what this truly is.
I agree 100%. I'm glad you brought this story up. I did a little quick research. I believe Joe Kent, the director of the Counterterrorism Agency Center, I believe he's what they call a Gold Star spouse. Did you see that? Which means I believe, and I hope I'm getting this right. I just was breezing trying to prep for tonight, but I think it means he has his spouse was deceased from one of the previous conflicts that he and her were probably both involved with, and I don't know the whole background on it, but this is somebody, as you mentioned, who's sitting in a very lofty position, and for obvious reasons. I think he had 11 or 15 deployments in previous conflicts over in the sandbox and those places, and obviously held in very high esteem to have this lofty position. But he, as mentioned in the quote that you just read, and this is the thing that we're finding so overwhelmingly divisive between what we generally would call the liberty movement, the MAGA movement, the conservative side of the equation. So many people, it does appear, have been, I'm going to say what my beliefs are. They've been misled by the propaganda. They haven't seen through it. And here we are in another conflict. And this thing is spilling over into something bigger than was ever intended, or maybe not. We don't really know. But at least what was sold to us was this is going to be, we're going to wipe out whatever their capabilities were that they were going after. We've now known from several people in high places that the whole smoke and mirrors thing about them being ready to have nuclear weapons ready for deployment appears to be completely debunked by both Tulsi Gabbard and this Joe Kent as part of the Counterterrorism Center. Both are saying, no, that's not true. And the story starts to fall apart from there. And now it looks like we've got Marines moved into position to get boots on the ground. This is spilling over into something bigger, and it should have never happened to begin with, because the voice of the people was not asked about this, which would have been Congress's job, as we mentioned last week with the esteemed professor we had on it. And I think, through that conversation, we were disagreeing, and now there's just more evidence that continues to come out. People who are in a position to know, and people who are in a position to have studied these things for a long time, are in complete agreement with us. Number one, we shouldn't be there because it's not our job to police the world. And number two, the guy who's sitting in office that pulled the trigger on this thing promised us we would not be getting into another conflict. And like Joe Kent said, there is no imminent threat to this country. So what are we there for? And now we're eating crow over there begging other countries to support our opening up of the Strait of Hormuz because our forces are stretched in an effort to do that. There is just so many things wrong with this. And I am glad that this guy stepped away with honor. As you said, the long knives are probably coming out for him because he's bucking the system. He's going against the agenda, and the agenda wants us over there for whatever reason. And this guy stood up and praised him too. I'll salute to Joe Kent for his efforts as well.
Oh yeah, I mean this takes a huge act of courage. We know that speaking out on Israel when you're in a position like this is not going to do you any favors. And you're correct in thinking so. His wife was killed in action in Syria, and he himself has quite a decorated background. He has received quite a lot of awards for his time in combat. And this is someone who has the experience to speak out on this, and it's not just opinion. Like, he's been there, he's seen it. It was in this position that he was in, the Director of National Counterterrorism. You don't just get that job by accident. You don't just interview well. Like, you have to have the experience to back it up, and he did. And he is willing to come out and say this. And I do not think we can discredit that in any capacity. I think this is something more people should be willing to hear out, because this is so important that we understand that we are continuing to be lied to about everything else outside of that.
Yeah, thank you. That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
You may have also seen Kevin Hassett, I think is his name, an aide under Trump, recently had commented on, all of this ongoing war nonsense, and basically had said that what's happening there will directly impact the American consumer, but that's the least of our concerns. And I understand that that's probably not, there's probably a different meaning behind that other than the last thing that we care about is you. But I think that's how we should take it, because that's what they really mean. What they really mean is that the last thing we in office care about is you, the peons, the peasants, the little people. That's how they really feel, and they show that in their actions.
Mm-hmm. And going back a couple episodes ago, I think maybe it was when we had Andy on a couple weeks ago, one of the themes that seemed to run throughout many of the points we talked about was the desire of some of these people in the elite level, the global elite level, to wipe out a big part of the global population. And you might have seen today, as long as we're on this subject, I'm going to talk about Catherine Austin Fitts, who I know we've talked about before on various things, who was a very high level official as well. And what she is suggesting is that shutting down the Strait of Hormuz is going to do a couple of significant things. Number one, economically, it will be crippling. But number two, as part of that, and the lack of the flow of oil around the world that comes out of that part of the Middle East, is going to have what she alluded to. I won't have the exact words, but is a food scarcity problem, because of fuel and things that are coming out of there, fertilizers, whatever, that are byproducts and used from the manufacturer, what have you, what comes out of there. But she's suggesting, and further goes on to state that, again, she believes this is all part of the master plan. This action taking place to shut down the flow of oil to feed the world the supplies they need to keep their economies running is ultimately going to end up causing a food scarcity issue, which once again plays into the hands of the global elites, who either want to kill a bunch of us off or put us in a position to be completely helpless, which either one of those things could come out of what she is suggesting. And again, this is a person who has sat in the highest levels of office as support to presidents and so forth, who's making these sort of observations. And I think we all need to wake up and need to wade our way through the propaganda. Of course, it's effective. They have had years studying on how to make this stuff effective and appealing and palatable to the public. And so pretty soon we're standing up waving the flag. Let's go charge Iran. And that is how we have got drug into every war in the last 100 years plus, because they got us whipped into a frenzy believing that we need to be in there. And we absolutely should not. As this guy said, there was no imminent threat to this country.
The one thing I will say about that, and I know I've said it on here too, is that, there can be as many people in your generation saying, yeah, let's go fight this war as they want, but they're not the ones that are going to go fight it. My generation is not interested. My generation is stepping as far away as they can from the military for a reason. And there are so many people who have been in recently have spoken out and saying, I'm so glad I don't wear this country's uniform anymore. What a relief it is to not be a part of this shit show. And you shouldn't either. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the sentiment of all of the younger generations, and for good reason. We know that we're the pawns of the people who actually have the money and actually have the power and actually have the final say in what happens with all of these things, the Strait of Hormuz and how it affects us. I don't think it really has anything to do with war games. I think it is directly tied to how it impacts the global population. Mm-hmm. Of course.
Yeah. Another story, I don't know if I mentioned it last week when we were on. Another story I seen, and you really never know. Are we getting a psyop fed to us to get us revved up about something else? But there was a suggestion about the draft, and maybe that's because, and maybe it's because many young people are seeing through the smokescreen. Although we're being fed information that recruiting has never been as high as it is now. Everybody's revved up, all this and that, and we really don't know. But one of the things I did read about the possibility of the draft being instated, this will shock a lot of people. And once again, I don't have where that story came from. It was something I seen about a week ago, but it suggested consideration would be given to drafting all the way to age 65. So people in my generation had better get their ear to the ground. Whether or not this story is true, I cannot corroborate that at this point, but I can only suggest that I seen a story that suggested this was a possibility, that if the draft was going to be reinstated, that they could go all the way up to age 6. Just something to think about. I'm not saying it's true. I'm not saying it's not true. I'm just saying I read it, and it ought to give pause. Because if they're thinking about going all the way up to age 65, they're planning for a big one.
Yeah. Well, I think they are regardless.
Yeah.
They're planning for a big something. Yeah. I mean, we know that. We can see that in everything around us. And I mean, I can go down that rabbit hole all day, but before I do that, I think I want to veer a little bit here into something that is very much tied to that conversation and tied to all of the commotion that's being stirred up around these things. And that is that I'm sure you saw that the DOJ has indefinitely paused the unsealing of the Epstein files, citing none other than regional instability and national security. Oh, no shit. How absolutely convenient.
Yeah. Well, one of the things we talked about, I think, either on air or in person was, this is just a big redirection. This is a shell game. Now the Epstein thing's going to move to the background because there's too many heavy hitters. We're going to get caught up in that, or we're going to follow the trail down and find out who the heavy hitters were once we wade through all who got leveraged by the shenanigans that went on. But isn't it curious how all that stuff now is a backstory? And we suggested that this is what was coming. Is this truly part of what this thing was? I'm sure there's a multifaceted reason why we're being drugged into this, or why we allowed Israel to walk us in there, grab us by the nose and lead us in there. To your previous point, people waking up and your generation waking up. I think this is so important, so important. And, if there's folks out there that are waking up and want to know what they can do, please drop us a line. It is up to us to stand in unison and say, no, The voice of the people is the only way we are supposed to become engaged in a war. We will decide when our kids' lives are worth putting at risk. Not somebody sitting in high places, moving chessboard pieces around on the global stage and using our kids for cannon fodder. We, the people, that is exactly why that thing was written up that way, so the whole country has an opportunity to weigh in through our representation, which we know is a joke as well. But if it truly worked the way it was, the only way our kids would be going marching off the war in some foreign place where we have no business sticking our nose. We are not the world policemen, is if the whole country, through our elected officials, said, "Yep, we agree. This is worth fighting for, and we're gonna go along through an act of Congress. We're gonna give the authorization." That is exactly why it was that way. We are not supposed to have, and there's stories coming out. I don't know if you've seen them. Basically said Trump and Kushner made this decision. There was no running this through the DOD, running it through whatever our intelligence agencies, whatever the people were telling. All of the assets. The stories are out that Trump and Kushner made this decision because somebody said that they're going to be ready with 10 or 11 bombs in the next few weeks, and they just cut it loose. That is a king, not to borrow the phrase used by some on the other side or some outside of our liberty movement side, but no kings. No, we do not have a king that can just say, "Okay, peons, go die for me on some foreign land." That is not what this country is founded on. Not at all.
Well, I think it just further drives home the point that somebody else is controlling the moves behind the scene. I mean,
Yeah.
there would have been pushback, at least from the Democrats, right? If that were true and there was no other reason behind it, like no other force behind it, the Democrats who, whether real or not, claim to hate Trump that are in office would have said, "Hey, whoa, this is what's happening. We need to do something here. We can't stand for this." Now, obviously, yes, are they all just one party? Sure, of course. But to uphold this facade that they're not, they would have had to speak out and say, "Hey, whoa, tyrant in office. This is the end of democracy." That's their favorite thing to say. They would have said it.
Yeah.
But they don't, because they all love Israel. And they're all taking money from Israel.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I just still fully believe that this is the problem here. And, maybe someday we'll come to find out that's not true.
Yeah.
But somebody is the one that's behind all of this.
Yeah,
Maybe it's not the Zionists, but it's somebody. It sure as shit isn't our government in control. That is so clear. It couldn't be more clear.
Yeah, and a level even deeper and lower and further removed than that is just look at them down there with the SAVE Act today. Here again, 85, 89, somewhere in the high 80% of this country wants to have some positive form of identification to vote, and they're down there simply not going to pass it. They don't care what we say. They do not care about you. Remember what George Carlin said, the American Dream, all the way back in 2005. They don't give a F about you, and they don't. If they certainly are not listening to us, that is what we need to wake up to. That is what we have to decide we are going to end, because they send our kids off to war. They pollute our water. They pollute our air. They pollute our food. They put shots in our bodies that are killing us. And we have sat here and tolerated it. The only way this ends is when we stand in unison and say we're not taking this anymore.
Well, the other piece to all this, since we're talking about how, now they're just saying they don't have to release the Epstein files anymore, these things really go hand in hand here. If we're thinking about the things that we learned from the Epstein files, did we pay attention at all? Those files are still accessible. Yes, they pulled many of them down, and I'm sure are continuing to pull them down in the wee hours, because it's impossible to sift through them all anyway. So it'd be very easy to hop back on and pluck some of the, more incriminating ones out that are already live. But what we've learned is just how much this truly is a death cult. The people in power are truly, actually, no jokes, no exaggeration, no sarcasm, are killing us for what they believe to be gain.
No.
This is ritual sacrifice. So if this is what is so important to them, if this is what they believe is keeping them in power, if this is what they believe is necessary for them to do to stay at the top of the food chain, well, war is a great way to sacrifice a whole lot of people all at once.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
These things are not happenstance. They're not. And like, at a certain point, you have to just be able to take your head out of the sand and see that all the dots connect. And the only reason that you're not seeing the connection is cognitive dissonance. You're allowing yourself to shield that part of the truth because it's a hard pill to swallow. And I think that's so much of what's going on. Some people are distracted. The rest don't want to see because it's too hard to deal with. And it's so morally crushing to figure out what we can possibly do when that's the reality.
But and that's why I want to continue to call back on these historical events from 250 years ago. Think about these men out there, and then oftentimes the women as well that were supporting the effort of the Patriots. These guys are dragging cannons 300 miles across frozen rivers through mud and snow and winter, and they half of them don't have good shoes, they don't have good equipment. They were that committed, and that is the value in looking back at that history. They sacrificed everything, and if we are not willing to sacrifice, we aren't going to have, and that's why we don't have. And we're trying to bring points to people to say, look, it is so obvious. I know it's overwhelming. I know it's daunting. It doesn't look as if there is anything that we can do. You have to get that out of your head. When those patriots on these shores decided that they were casting off the crown, they were standing in direct opposition to the greatest military force on the face of the earth at that time. They had the best Navy, they had the best military, and these ragtag bunch of independent-minded rebels over here said, we're not giving up what we came over here to start. We're not giving it up. And as you mentioned early on, that is what we have to get in our heart. We have to say, we cannot concern ourselves of what the price is to maintain what we were supposed to have and to give to you guys, future generations like those folks did. They gave up everything, their wealth and their fortune, but they did not lose their sacred honor. And they did it for us, and we're letting it be taken away. That is why we continue to harp on these things, and we'll continue to call to mind those wonderful, courageous, heroic deeds that the patriots that come before us did to provide for us an opportunity. We cannot let this be squandered. We cannot let that blood spilt be in vain.
Yeah, it's spot on. And, we've said it before about different things on this show that America really is a stronghold when we think about this conversation, because this is a global problem, but not every nation has the ability to actually fight back like we do here. We have a Second Amendment, and for how much longer? We have to use it to our advantage at a certain point, because it's a lot more riding on this than just our country's independence. What we're talking about is so damning, so threatening to everyone around the globe. And again, I don't know how many times I have to say it. We don't say this to try to black pill anyone. It's just a matter of looking at all of the evidence and the patterns. This is where we're headed, and we have to eventually do something. I know that I've brought it up to you before. I wanted to share it at some point again tonight, because I've started to kind of see they're making a little bit of progress as far as getting their name out there. There is a group called the Modern Exodus. It's a couple of podcasters that are in this space that kind of banded together, and they've expanded, and they have, it's just a group specifically for young men. And it is very much about removing yourself from the system and growing your skills to live outside of the system, And like we've talked about so many times on here, changing yourself, changing your own circumstances so that you can better that of your family, so that you can better that of your community. That's the entire point. And I just wanted to share that again here for people listening. I think it's such an important initiative. I will put it in the show notes. It's called The Modern Exodus. You just go to themodernexodus.com. They have social strategy training regarding, what we can all do next with what's going on, mindset training, tactical, financial, physical. They're really trying to tackle all of these things to make the younger generation of men stronger mentally and physically so that we can combat this, because our current state, the way that we have been dumbed down and propagandized, we do not have the ability to fight back, and they're trying to take a stance on that. So I just wanted to throw that out there because I think it's so important for groups like this to try. It's the only thing we can do. All we can do is try.
Yeah. I think that's such a great point, and I think it starts with recognition. And your generation has a much clearer eye at recognizing the tyranny that we're living under, the oppression that we're living under. My generation, and we talked about it, is it's somewhere in that 40 plus or 50 plus, and then 40 or 50 under, has really got a different view on the world around them. Many of you. And many of the ones in my generation, the 50 plus, 60 plus, are either so numb to it, it's easier just to let it go by. I'm not fighting it. I'm not sticking my neck out. I'm most of the way through my life. I have no energy for it. But the younger folks, and what I said to a couple of the people that I have an opportunity to bump into from time to time that have young children, when you first recognize that we don't have what they pretend we have. We got poison being put in us. The education system, nothing but propaganda. The water's polluted. They're dumping crap out of the sky on us. Everything is negative. And if you are a young parent bringing a child into this world, you're going to say, I don't want my child exposed to what this world has become. Now you have recognized, now you can take some step. As you mentioned, it can be little steps with preparing yourself. How much can you remove yourself from being a dependent ward of the government? See, many people in my age group, well, we'll just wait for the government to fix the problem. That is exactly how we got to where we are. If your group is saying, I'm not worried about it, I'm going to turn to my neighbor, I'm going to turn to my small community of friends, we're going to fix this problem, we're going to push on, we're going to homeschool, we're going to raise our own vegetables, we're going to raise our own chicken and eggs, we are stepping out of what has led my generation to be numb and dumb to the situation that we find ourselves in. And, when we started talking about this 25 years ago, everybody laughed, a big joke, but we were very unsuccessful in waking the majority up. But somehow, some way, your generation is recognizing, and it all starts with recognition. You have to understand, shut off the propaganda box. Anything that comes to you from the legacy media is a lie. Anything that comes to you, everything that comes to you out of government is a lie. And you know how you know that? When they put their hand on that Bible and stand in front of all of us and say they are going to uphold, defend, and preserve that Constitution, and then they throw the thing in a trash can and they never pick it up again until the next campaign, and every action that they take, every bill that they vote on, almost every single one is in direct violation, making them a liar. That's how you know they're liars, because they are operating outside of the very promise that they made in front of all of us when they accepted that office. That's Trump, that's the justices, that's everybody in Congress at the state and the federal level, and it's probably all the way down to your county commissioner and your dog catcher. Because if they are not standing defending that Constitution, like that sheriff out in Las Vegas did. He's going to protect the community. He is the chief law enforcement officer of the county. His job is to protect the county. The judge, who obviously has some political agenda or axe to grind, decides we're going to let a felon with 35 priors back out into the street who has caused mayhem and harm to the citizens, and that sheriff said, no, that's what we got to start doing. We all got to grow that spine and stand up and say, no, we're not going to take it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know how many times we can say it. It just doesn't take that much effort. Right now, there's no effort. I mean, any effort would be an improvement, literally. So it's not going to take that much. I mean, Jared and Mike, they talk about it all the time they're on. Showing up to these meetings, half the time, it's just the people in office that are sitting in these things. They don't expect anyone to show up. If 5 people show up, it's enough to throw them off.
Absolutely correct. It certainly is. And go in there with a few points to make. You don't have to have no big long script memorized. Go in there with a few points to make, like these folks did up in Connecticut. We're tired of getting the vaccine thing crammed down our throat. We're tired of being bullied and pushed into a corner because we want to do homeschooling. We are tired. We are tired of the attack on our right to keep and bear arms and defend ourselves. We're tired of it. And if you go in there and start raising hell at the local level, that's what we said. And again, we mentioned it last week with our guest. We believe in starting at the local level. That is where we have an opportunity to influence. If you think you can go down to your state capital, or much less the cesspool in Washington, and pound on some representative's desk down there and get results, you are kidding yourself. You're kidding yourself. They don't listen to us. That's obvious by what's going on right now with the SAVE Act. Nobody has to look any further. Nobody has to decide what team you're on. It's not a Republican Democrat thing. They're not doing what 85% of us want. So it's affecting every demographic. Black, white, rich, poor, gay, straight, Republican, Democrat. They are not doing what we want. It is them against us. And the sooner you recognize that, the quicker you are able to do something about it.
Yeah. Yeah, so moving on a little bit from that, I did want to ask you your thoughts on whether or not you think that Bibi Netanyahu is dead.
They're kind of laughing about it now, about all these stories coming out that the guy in Iran is dead, Netanyahu's dead. So what I will say, I watched a thing last week or over the weekend about the development of body doubles and these masks. That basically the CIA and other government agencies teamed up with Hollywood, and they developed these masks that are remarkably hard to detect. They're a mask. So, my guts are telling me that I don't really believe it, but I don't have a good feel for how to measure whether my guts got anything to go off of.
Well, for me, I guess I'm trying to figure out what the agenda would be for trying to sell the idea that he is on social media. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out like what would be the advantage to those groups. Mm-hmm. By being like, oh yeah, he's dead, and then he's just not really dead. Like, I guess I don't quite know what the motive there would be. If he really was dead, and if they're trying to cover that up, I also don't know what that means. I don't know what that changes. I don't know who takes his place. It's the same as the Epstein thing. Just because the man is gone doesn't mean the evil no longer persists. I mean, the group still exists. He's the face of Zionism, but he's not the end of Zionism. So does it really mean anything? I don't know, but I think it's interesting, and just to back it up a little bit for any of our listeners who haven't seen any of this, there's just speculation about whether or not Netanyahu has been killed because he's missed a ton of meetings. People have started questioning it. A very weird AI video came out from a coffee shop that's been closed for a long time. And he's just in the coffee shop, and there's kind of some weird stuff that, again, looks to be AI, but it's hard to know. People have been running it through AI scanners. It's like 85% chance of being AI. There's also alleged images of what look to be him deceased, which are, like 70-some%, again, being run through AI scanners, claim to not be AI, but it's so hard to detect this stuff. It is so difficult to see through all of the AI nonsense that it's hard to know. I just think the only reason it's important to consider it as something that may be real or not real is because I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of this. And I think it's hard for us to know how much of it we've already seen as far as AI manipulation in our news feeds. And I think that we have to be very cognizant of that and very aware, because our minds are very easily manipulated by these types of stories, especially those that result in an emotional response.
Mm-hmm.
And so it will be very easy to change the mindset of the majority of people in this country by simply sharing videos that are not even based in reality and creating news stories that are manufactured entirely. And I think these are just things that, as we start to move through this very weird time with AI just absolutely skyrocketing in use, we have to be aware, and we have to be able to be 100% certain of the things that we're seeing before we can attach ourselves to the story.
Yeah, I kind of like that. I'm in the same boat. Obviously, Israel is a major factor in an ongoing war. So we know there is always psychological operations that are part of a conflict. And is this all part of it? You know, this Khomeini or whatever the guy's name is, who's the son of the previous supreme leader, now is they're throwing questions up about him being deceased. You see stories about he lost a leg, he's in a coma. Oh, he's already dead. No, he's fine. And I think there's a lot of that maybe that's also going on with Netanyahu. Although maybe he is dead. You know, maybe they had a precision strike, or they had a sapper team in there that was able to do the deed. I don't know. I tend to be cautious about weighing in on that, because we know there is so much fog right now, particularly with the conflict. But Netanyahu is a global figure, not just Middle East or specific to Israel, or who Israel deems are threats or pretends are threats. He is a world influencer. He is throughout. So if this thing is true or it is not true, it may be designed either way to be trying to accomplish something. And I think it's a little hard for us to wade through that. I don't have any doubt in my mind, if he was dead and they wanted to make him look like he was alive, they could do that. If he's alive and they want to make it look like he's dead, they can do that too. So I think what is the reaction they're trying to get out of people here in this country and around the world by making some announcement like that, whether it's true or not? It's so hard to figure out, as you described it, let alone the influences of AI and what's it's able to, how convincing it's able to be. We know that people are easily led around by the nose. If you put things out on the news or what they believe is news, pretty soon they're 100% committed to that, even if it is completely contrary to what their conscience tells them is right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up earlier too about the masks thing, because I had this thought a couple weeks ago when some stupid celebrity event was going on, and you may have seen all the back and forth going on about Jim Carrey being there.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, just kind of backing this up for our listeners, anyone who hasn't seen this story, whatever. Again, I don't know what event it was. I just saw all of the stories about Jim Carrey being there, and it just being very weird. It didn't really look like him. It mostly did, but his eyes were weird, and he was saying things that didn't really line up, because Jim Carrey is one of these guys who, through the last several years, really started being weird and being like, hey, I think this is all some really demonic, batshit crazy stuff going on. I don't want to be a part of it. So, of course, he kind of became the oddball, because anytime you say any of that stuff in Hollywood, you're immediately ousted. And that's pretty much what happened with him. And he always said, if I ever show up to any of these events and I'm talking like this, it's not me. And so this is what happens. He shows up and he's really not talking like he normally would about any of this stuff. And people start questioning it. And a few days later, a makeup artist comes out and says, oh, that was me. I was wearing a mask. I fooled you all. And when that story came out, because basically the people that were questioning it before the makeup artist comes out and says anything, right, is all these people on the internet who question everything, who love all the conspiracies, start going, hey, what the hell? This isn't Jim Carrey. They killed Jim Carrey. Here's another one. They do the shit to people all the time who speak out against them. They killed him. Now they're trying to like get people back under the spell of the celebrities by making him, talk in favor, whatever. This is the story that the internet world is saying. So then the makeup artist comes out and says this, oh, it was just me. And the thought that I had is like, that's a really good cover to be like, oh shit. Our whole thing didn't work where we tried to use this mask in person. We got busted. Let's just have a makeup artist pretend that it was them.
Mm-hmm.
Like anyone could do that at any point. If the story doesn't work, if the mask doesn't work, if the story doesn't sell, you just find somebody else to be like, oh, it's art. Like, sure, that's a great cover. And whether or not that's true or whether or not it's just my mind always jumps to the conclusion that everything is a lie, I don't know. But I think it's a lot better to err on the side of everything is a lie and then backtrack to find the truth from there, rather than thinking everything that you hear is true and then trying to weed out what's a lie. Because more often than not, you're being lied to.
Correct. And let's look at it biblically. All right, so the Bible tells us that Satan is the father of all lies. We've been proclaiming on this podcast for a very, very long time, probably since the beginning, that this battle that we are in is good versus evil. Satan rules the world, and Satan's the father of all lies. So basically everything that we get spoon-fed, you could take it as a lie. Pretty much everything you get spoon-fed. In addition to that, and that's kind of the backdrop to my thinking, the overarching thing is Satan's the father of all lies, and we're being lied to constantly. So who's influencing those people that are lying to you? Satan. Secondarily, we brought Boone Cutler up several times since we had the very pleasant, great opportunity to have met him. God rest his soul, now deceased. But Boone Cutler told us out in Vegas that the battle that's going on, and it's going on right now, it's in your head. So don't allow what somebody is trying to put in your head to influence your thinking or how you're going to act. Make sure you can confirm before you act, because there's a whole lot of uncertainty going on out there, and that uncertainty is being done on purpose to cause confusion, to cause you to cling to something that you hold dear to your heart, or maybe pursue something that now appears to be more correct than what a core belief may have been. Be very, very cautious about making significant decisions, because we are being lied to, as previously mentioned, biblical, on the grand scale, the father of all lies, and we're being lied to all the time. And secondarily, that this battle is in our head, and if they can get us to think something and believe something and to not act or to act based on what they put in our head, we are helping them out. So we have to be very, very cautious about taking any action about something that we cannot confirm to be true. And this goes all the way back to the conflict that we now find ourselves in. We let propaganda stand many of the decision makers in this country up unopposed to us engaging in another war, when now we have somebody who's right in the middle of gathering intelligence. Counterterrorism Center. This guy was the director, and he says, not me. I can't go along with it. That should give everybody pause to think, I better look this over. I know we got the Joe Rogan saying that we shouldn't be in there, and Ron Paul, who in my mind is a hell of a guy, and he is wonderfully thought out, and I've been online with his thinking for a very long time. But here you got a guy, Joe Kent, who is in the middle of this. He is in the middle of what would have been the decision-making process, and he says, I'm out. I can't go along with this. That should give everybody pause for thought. Please share that story about Joe Kent bowing out, because, as he said, we were led into it by Israel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that point up, that if we react and respond to lies that we are fed, we're helping their cause. I think that's so important. It brings me to another story I wanted to share before we wrap things up. Niantic, which is an AI tech company, recently disclosed that they collected 30 billion real-world images through Pokemon Go. And this is an example of, in the physical sense, how our compliance, without even realizing, was extorted and used for their gain. all these kids, adults even, all around the world were obsessed with Pokemon Go, taking photos and videos of everything for this game without realizing that now it's all in an AI database. I mean, more data was collected of real world imagery around the globe in such a short time than any team could have ever been put together to accomplish. It would
How
have
about
cost
that?
trillions of dollars
How
to
about that?
collect what they did for free.
Yep.
And these are things that we need to be considering with everything that we do with our phones. Everything. AI, like Snapchat filters, all of it. Anything that you're plugging your face into, all of it is being used for exactly this. Pokemon Go was huge, 5-7 years ago? I'm not even really sure when it was big.
Yeah.
And just now we're finding out that, hey, cool, we've already got all that we need. We put together a huge database, and they're claiming that it's going to be used as navigation data for delivery robots. But think about what you can do with that kind of tech. Think what that kind of tech does in the wrong hands.
Sure. And this is where people got to wake up. I mean, we just got to wake up. You know, I remember when you guys were little, and we try to stress upon you and friends and everybody that giving up information about yourself is giving somebody else power over you. So you should be very guarded. You know, these people that they think Facebook, the same thing that you're talking about Pokemon, the same sort of thing could be said about Facebook. Think about the data that could be collected. And believe me, what do you think all these data centers are for? They pile all this stuff in, run it through computer. You become predictive. You become everything about you is known, and somebody with nefarious intent can use that against you. Yet we have millions, billions of people putting everything that they do, where they go, who they're with, what time they're at the house, what time they're. This is all information that can be used against you, and we need to start looking at all this stuff in that light.
Mm-hmm.
The enemy is those that lord it over us. Do not make their job easy. Do not give them any more tools to use against you. Use cash, people. Take cash out and go do your purchases at the restaurant, at the store with cash. Minimize the amount of information that you are giving to somebody who most probably is going to use it against you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be a very tough sell, I know, about with people 50 and plus. This seemed like just a new convenience in life. Oh, look, I can just walk by and swipe my card. Isn't this grand? And then 10 minutes later, you have an advertisement popping up on your phone for the very product you bought when you never saw it there before. That should be alarming to you. I remember that was alarming to me 10 years ago. How in the hell does somebody know right now to pop up on my phone a product that I purchased? And there it is. We give away data about ourselves that somebody else can use against us. So we should be very, very guarded about that. Here we're learning about something that seemed very innocent. All the kids are having a great time, even adults, as you said. They're running around chasing something. I didn't ever understand it. Never got it. But people all over the world, as you said. And all they were doing was feeding information into some place that probably it could be turned against you.
Mm-hmm. And I know you and I have had this conversation off the show, but it's a good time to bring it up here. You brought up the AI data centers.
Yeah.
And all these people are using all these AI tools for completely free. It's totally free for you to get online and ask AI any question. Yet these data centers they're putting in cost billions of dollars.
Yep.
Do you think that these people are doing it out of the kindness of their heart for you to type all of your thoughts and feelings into their AI? Yep. No. No. Free is the exact opposite of what this is. Every single thing that you put into these databases is being used to create your digital twin, so that whoever it is that has access to this information, it doesn't have to be the good guys. You don't know who has access to this information. They can use it however they want. And best case scenario, they're targeting ads because they know what you like, they know what you think, they know where you go, they know how you spend your time, and they're just targeting ads so they can sell you products. Worst case scenario, they now know what to feed you when they create those AI news feeds that we talked about earlier in the episode to manipulate your next move.
Yeah.
Think about that and think about the implications on that on a global scale. That is as scary as it gets. And that's so much worse than anything George Orwell could have even imagined. That's where we're at.
100%. And as we talk about this generational split, and I think it's become a little bit of a theme here in this far into the new year, but so many people have been influenced by the propaganda, indoctrination, education system that we have not been taught how to think. We've been taught what to think, and what so many people, how we think is that we just believe what we're spoon fed. And if you hear it on a TV, well, it's got to be the truth. So pretty soon, everybody, or many, many people, not everybody, I always say everybody, but a huge segment of people they'll believe anything. So we're very easily manipulated when you give up your filter of common sense. You just take what you're being told and you accept it as reality. You basically are no longer an autonomous person. You are the person that spoon feeds things into your head. This goes back to Boone Cutler. This battle is in our head. We have to back way up and say, push all this noise aside. Let me clear my head of it and think about what is real. What is real, and push the noise aside. Because this is a game of deception. It's a game of lies. And we are playing into it by giving the enemy data. So wherever you can find a way to minimize the data that you're giving up, by using cache, by shutting the phone off when you don't need it, by any of those things, that's what we need to start doing. This is a monster. It already has a huge advantage over us because all of us have played into this system at a certain level. We got to recognize it. That's first, recognition, and then start backing away. Quit giving information. Change your activities. Change your routine. Break things up. Do things differently because somebody already, as you said, has a digital twin for you. And this is a scary thought. So it's up to us to start with recognition and start backing away from some of these things that have been presented to us. And maybe oftentimes they do feel like a convenience, but it's given up a lot of information that can be used to harm you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a wild time out there. It is the Wild West. Holy cow. But, there's only one more thing that I personally wanted to share, and it's, I guess I would say, on the good side of things. So before I do that, was there any other news stories or anything that you wanted to touch on this week?
Well, no, but I want to call attention all the way back to the toast we made earlier, and Jared and the sheriff out in Las Vegas and the folks up in Connecticut and the folks up in Michigan that are pushing back. They are taking a stand. We all need to take courage from that. We all need to learn from that example. When there's something locally that is troubling you, gather your neighbors, go to the town hall meeting, go to the county commissioner's meeting, go to the sheriff's office, and start demanding change. It's the only way it's going to happen. If we sit back and think somebody else is going to do it, by the time you guys' generation is my age, it's all going to be gone. It's all going to be gone. We have to start pushing back.
Yeah, for sure. So to that point, the last thing that I wanted to share is over the weekend, I had the opportunity to spend some time with a few different doctors. And what I thought was very interesting about my experience and what I am walking away from it with a positive note is that I learned from these people who've all been doctors for many years that everyone who I was with and many people that they know who are, in similar positions are trying to figure out how to remove themselves completely from the system because they know, and some of them are only just really, I think, starting to grasp it or starting to come out of the shock of what they went through during COVID. but they know that what they went through during COVID was wrong, was a lie, was the complete opposite of everything that they went into this field for. And they're also aware that the entire educational system surrounding their profession specifically is completely bought and paid for by big pharma, and even goes deeper than that, in that they use certain tactics like sleep deprivation, specifically, like making you work 80 hours a week, specifically, just the very same way that they do in the military, and for the very same reason, for you to buy into a narrative. It's buy-in, it's forced buy-in to an idea. Now you've kind of trauma bonded with your classmates and the people who graduated around the same time as you. You've all went through this experience together. Now you kind of have to, toe the line and walk in step with your peers, because you're part of this community now. You went through this thing together. And there's a lot of people who are now speaking out on this because they recognize that the reason that the medical system and the medical schooling system specifically is set up the way that it is for this reason and for this purpose, so that you do march in step, and so that you do fall in line with the narrative and you do not question it. But to me, what I gathered is that many of them are. And I'm walking away from that with some positivity in my heart, because during COVID, what we kept asking ourselves is, how can so many just go along with this? And if the group that I was with is any example for the greater majority, what I learned is they were just trying to protect their own families. And it was no different for many of them than the, single mom who was coerced into getting the vaccine because she was just trying to do the right thing for her and her kids. And for many of them, they went through the same experience, and they're feeling the same remorse and the same guilt and the same grief and the same loss. And if we can transfer that feeling to every other profession, maybe there are so many more people than I originally gave credit to who felt these things, who went through this, who are trying to understand it now, 6 years later. And if that's true, if there are this many people that are having these thoughts and are having these deep emotions about this horrible thing that they put themselves through, knowing it was wrong, and now want to right that wrong, a lot of people are going to start getting angry. And when it was happening, you and I sat here and said, why aren't people angry? But maybe there was a delay. Maybe these people were trying to protect themselves, and now their anger is catching up to them. And for me, that gives me extreme hope, because we know that the consciousness of this country, of the world, is awakening. We know that. And if now we have all these different people in these different fields who are together, coming together and saying, whoa, something isn't right, then we have a chance. And I don't know what that looks like yet, and I don't know what that means on a grand scale, but I have felt that shift, and now I'm seeing that shift. And I think that is so important for people to know. It's there, it's coming, but if we want it to come to fruition, we all have to take an active role in it.
We have to be part of it. And I think that ties in so nice with some of the things we talked about earlier in the show tonight with the Jareds and the sheriff out in Las Vegas. They're standing up. They're saying no to the system that they know is broken. No has been feeding them lies. And most of the people, I think, in this country now are starting to acknowledge that the whole COVID thing and the COVID vaccine thing was a lie. There's going to be a few holdouts who just can't get over the point that they were convinced of, and they bought into it, and they pushed all their friends and all this. But many, many, many people are starting to acknowledge, and that is the turning point. When we start to notice that the people who are in charge have been lying to us. And it can start with the vaccine. It can start with the sheriff out there. It can start with those electors up in the state of Michigan. that are being attacked by the establishment government because you stepped out of line from what they wanted you to do, then you know they have been lying to us. They've been distorting the truth. They've been trying to drive us in the direction they wanted to go, not the direction we're supposed to have as free and independent people. That is the type of thing that we've been clamoring for years, and people start to wake up. And here's the other thing to that. Those that have collected all this power over us and stolen wealth from us, they're not going to give it up easy. We are going to be challenged every step of the way when we start pushing back, and we got to be committed, just like those brave patriots 250 years ago. We got to be committed to the cause, because we are going to be targeted. When you stand up and push back, you are the new target. They're going to put you up on TV. They're going to make an example of you. They're going to do whatever they can to squash that uprising back down. And we have to stay committed to the cause, which is the cause of personal liberty, being free, living your life as you see fit. That is what we're supposed to have here. And that's such a great story to tie in with the end of the show tonight. And it is a great story. And you got to believe some of the people that we've had on over the years since COVID, as guests, we're in similar things and trying to push back. And if we can start coalescing this energy, we can win this thing back. And there is always hope as long as we have a breath in us. Those of us who are standing up against the oppressive government, any tyranny of any kind, as long as there is a breath left in us, there is hope. And we just got to find those positive things to start building and pushing back with.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, that's a good way to wrap it up, I think. Went through a lot tonight, kind of a long episode, but a lot of good stuff there. So I'll let you close us out if you're ready to do it.
Yep, I have a verse for tonight. It goes like this: speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and the needy. And that comes from Proverbs 31, verse 8 and 9.
Perfect. Yeah, great way to wrap it all up. So with that, everybody, happy St. Patrick's Day. And, until next week, be thinking about ways that you can remove yourself from the system in any capacity. It can be so small. Every step is a step. Be thinking about ways that you and your family can get involved in strengthening yourself physically and mentally. And above all else, stay vigilant.
Stay vigilant.
Thank you so much for listening. We really do appreciate the support and truly love getting to share this message with anyone who wants or needs it. The best way for you to support the show is to subscribe, add a rating, and share with everyone you know. You can find us on Instagram, X, and at thefourthbox.com. We'll see you next Thursday at 6 p.m. Stay vigilant.